I'm AJ Gutierrez, the co-founder of Saga Education and host of EdHeads. As we think about the broader context of AI in education, we cannot deny the complex connections between technology, student outcomes, and data. And here to help us navigate that complexity is Erin Mote, who's the CEO and founder of InnovateEDU, which is a nonprofit organization that explores product development, talent development, as well as interoperability of data. This is EdHeads. Before we jump into all this great stuff you're working on, where does that passion come from? What part of your early life or early careers led you into education and technology?
It really comes from the desire to believe and to make sure that opportunity isn't confined for young people by the zip code that they grew up in. So I spent most of my career before education, actually not in the United States, in the global South. And at this moment, while we're talking about a revolution in technology and people are talking about Western-centric models for AI and Western-centric philosophies, I remind people that there's a lot of innovation that can happen from places that you don't expect it. So you probably use mobile payments. I Zelle and Venmo my friends when I split the check. That wouldn't have happened without M-Pesa.
I don't
in
split
Kenya.
the check. I usually have friends.
Well, you're better than I am. But that wouldn't have happened without M-Pesa, which is a mobile payments platform that came forward in Kenya, which was because there was no terrestrial internet, right? That the submarine cable didn't land there until the mid-2000s, 2008. And so innovation can happen anywhere. Inspiration can happen anywhere. Wisdom is often more widely held than we give credit people for. And so how do we always elevate partners to bring them to the front? How do we showcase the work and bring momentum, policy, technology, or capacity to really bring the momentum forward? But so much of that is part of that journey. And I think everybody thinks linear journeys are people's stories. Mine is not a linear journey, and frankly, one of failure. There were many moments in my life where I didn't know what the next step was. I didn't see a clear path. I didn't know what the next door that I was going to walk through was going to be. And I think we have to be honest that learning, some of our best learning comes from failure, and that not everything is this sort of meteoric rise. It's often fits and starts. It stumbles and stops, and how you surround yourself with people who are willing to extend a hand when you fall or give you a positive word when you fail is really what life's about.
And tell me a little bit about the school you started in New York and then transitioned from that to InnovateEDU.
Yeah. So I left working in national security and international development in 2012. The last set of projects that I worked around was the president's agenda for Rio, which was the climate change conference that predated the Paris Accords. And we wouldn't have Paris without Rio. But our platform in the U.S. government at that time was technology. And it was the unifying thing that really brought different departments together to work on a unified agenda for Rio. What would be possible with all types of climate technology, and really catalyzed folks from education to energy to think about how do we look at learning, how do we look at the science and the research base, and how do we use technology to really help us combat one of our most pressing global challenges. That was the last project I worked on in my government service. And then I worked for some big tech companies. I worked for Mozilla as their next generation learning expert and a number of other big tech companies. I had thought when I left the administration that that's what I wanted to do, that was where I wanted to have impact and influence. And I will never forget flying home to New York, where I was living at the time. I left Washington, D.C. and went to New York on some really great advice that someone said, you'll never actually get out of government unless you leave D.C. I'll never forget this. I was watching The Good Dinosaur, which is this Disney movie, on the plane, and I just started crying, uncontrollably crying. The Good Dinosaur is actually not that sad, and I think I alarmed many people sitting next to me. But what I was confronting as I was watching The Good Dinosaur, and as I was thinking about coming out of these like very high profile C-suite meetings in Silicon Valley, was, gosh, there's just too much distance between me and impact right now. And so I got off the plane, and that next weekend I was walking with my now husband. He wasn't my husband at the time. We were dating, and Eric Tucker, and we were walking in downtown Brooklyn, and I said to him, I think I'm going to go back to government service. Like, this is great. I'm like making more money than I've ever made, and I'm miserable. I'm just totally and completely miserable. I'm like crying at The Good Dinosaur on the plane. Like, it was just this like, and he was like, that's not going to work for me, because I want to get married and have kids, and I want that to be with you, and you being out of the country 300 days a year and in places like South Sudan or Afghanistan doesn't really line up with that plan. So really slappy message and marriage proposal on a street corner in Brooklyn. But he then asked me a really important question that is a pivot point in my life, which is, what's the thing that has brought you the most joy over the last 5 years? And I thought about doing some of the work we did on E-rate modernization and wiring schools in places like Anacostia that were 15 minutes from my house in DC, but could have been 15,000 miles, because I had been driving connectivity in places like South Sudan and Kenya that were more advanced than literally 6 metro stops from my house in DC. And so he looked at me really earnestly and he said, well, we could start a school. And I had some choice words for him that I probably can't mention without this being an R-rated podcast. And later that weekend, we drew the concept for Brooklyn Lab on a napkin. I still have the napkin. And we wrote things like, teachers like doctors. Every kid gets the attention they need. Small group instruction as a core of the school day. Passion-driven learning. So we wrote these things and we designed this model. He was still working at the Federal Reserve Bank in New York at the time. And we wrote a grant for NGLC, and we got that planning grant, and we wrote a charter for a school with Kate Cochran, who now leads the National Partnership for Student Success, and thus Brooklyn Lab Charter School was born. And then InnovateEDU came before Brooklyn Lab, frankly, as the scaling agent for the design of Brooklyn Lab. And then we got some really great advice in a windowless conference room in San Francisco, where all good advice happens, was to have a separate nonprofit from the school. Because at that time in New York, go in your Wayback Machine to 2013, 2014, Bloomberg was leaving, de Blasio or Christine Quinn was coming in, likely politically. The charter rhetoric was really hot. And people were not keen to partner with charter schools. But our idea with Brooklyn Lab is that it would have been a laboratory school where the innovations that we developed there would scale nationally into other schools. And we needed a nonprofit to do that. And so that's how InnovateEDU was born alongside Brooklyn Lab.
There's so many exciting things you do at Innovate in terms of, as a nonprofit, working on product development, talent development, data interoperability. So the question is, what does data interoperability even mean? And like, why is that even important to people?
Yeah.
Why should it be important?
So data interoperability is the secure, seamless transition of data between applications. So let's define that for folks. But I talk about it as the pipes. So let's go back to my Brooklyn Lab days. I used to lead a bunch of field trips. It was one of my favorite things to do. We would get our kids all together. New York has so many charging stations for learning throughout the city that so much of what we used to do at Brooklyn Lab was to get our kids who had never left the borough of Brooklyn to Queens to go to the Science Museum or to go to the Natural History Museum in Manhattan, or to walk the African American burial ground, which was just across the Brooklyn Bridge. And so I used to love taking our kids on experiences and doing these like field trips around the city, because I really think cities have amazing charging stations for learning. But I would get back from those field trips having like ridden the subway and been on a field trip all day and, probably like confiscating 3 or 4 pieces of gum in the museum. And all I would want to do is take a hot shower. And so I would get home and I would take a hot shower, but I would never say in the shower, like, thank God for the pipes. And this is kind of the problem with people not understanding how important and foundational data interoperability is and only wanting to focus on the hot showers. So the hot showers in education are, better graduation rates, reducing chronic absenteeism, all these things that we know we need to do in outcomes, but we don't even have our arms sometimes around that problem because our data and our pipes aren't connected. They're not bringing us the hot showers. They're not giving us a picture of the whole child. And so I believe that good data interoperability, and privacy and cybersecurity. So if you think of those as 3 sort of legs of the stool, good foundational layers, when done well, can transform the way we think about opportunity and access for young people. And I think, we've seen this play out in other sectors, particularly on like R&D and innovation. We wouldn't have mRNA vaccines with COVID without the Human Genome Project, which it was all about mapping data and data interoperability at a global scale. We wouldn't have the ability to do those payments where you get other people to pay for dinner and don't have to split the check without financial interoperability. And so interoperability is all around us in other sectors, and we haven't realized its possibility in education. And I think that silo not being broken down inhibits a lot of the hot showers if we can't take care of the pipes.
From a district leader's perspective, how should an educator go about measuring or taking a step forward and looking at security and data interoperability? What are some of the metrics that and support you're providing InnovateEDU to support district leaders with that? So
data interoperability in education is our oldest alliance at InnovateEDU. It's called Project Unicorn. Not because it'll never happen, but because I think when you have data interoperability, it can be magical for your school or district. And so through Project Unicorn, we offer technical assistance for not just districts, but also for vendors. So the Project Unicorn community is almost 900 school districts who are actively receiving technical assistance and support, and over 300 vendors. So again, like holding the supply and demand side together to make those pipes work to get us the hot showers. We also do something called the State of the Sector report every October, and the school system data survey. So the school system data survey is happening right now this spring, and districts can take this survey, and it takes about 20 minutes, and then they get a customized assessment of where they are for free around data interoperability. What domains should they think about looking at? Sometimes it's data governance, sometimes it's leadership, sometimes it's technical infrastructure. But data interoperability isn't a technical problem. It's often a business problem in districts. And so it's about bringing teams together, uncommon alliances, even in the district, to help people understand what are they measuring, how could they measure, and how do they bring that together. And so then in October, we take the results of that school system data survey and we deliver a State of the Sector report, which follows some of our partners' work, whether that's at CCSSO or COSIN or CGCS, and says these are all organizations that do work at the intersection of data interoperability and education. And then the State of the Sector report sort of says, this is where we are, this is how much we've grown, this is how much we have to do, and this is where we need to make investments. And that rowing together of all these organizations through Project Unicorn, the standards bodies, the research, the data, the technical assistance, the supply side and demand side, has meant that right now, I think we have an unprecedented opportunity to look at data modernization in education with support from the White House. I mean, First Lady Joe Biden in August convened many of us along with 300 leaders from across the education space, and stood up in the East Room of the White House and said, interoperability, cybersecurity, and privacy, we need to have these foundational layers to do everything else we want to do in education. And we owe that investment in infrastructure to our systems and to our schools, frankly, to our kids.
So tell me a little bit more from an educator's perspective. You said there are a few things that are really important to take into consideration in the context of AI in education, the context of education.
educators are stewards of data for our young people. And actually, our regulatory policy and the law puts them in that place of stewardship, maybe more unique than any other role in society. Doctors have similar stewardship when it comes to those forms you sign in your doctor's office for HIPAA. But educators have that role because we imagine that data is part of the work that educators are doing, whether that's data that comes from EdTech or that's data that comes from the quiz that a young person is doing. And so just like teachers used to lock up their grade book to keep data secure and private and making sure that it was in a way that helped them make decisions, but also that they made sure that folks who didn't need access to the grade book didn't get access to the grade book. That's what the evolution of a modern data infrastructure needs to look like in districts and in organizations. And so I would include nonprofits here as well and states. And so there's three legs to this stool. Interoperability, how we bring data together safely and securely. The data privacy piece of it, how are educators good stewards and districts good stewards of education data. And it's important to say that they have been for many years, and I know will continue to be. And then cybersecurity, which is about locking up that grade book, but the stakes are a little bit higher now, because not only are we thinking about the person who might want that grade book, but also we have to think about folks who see our schools as critical infrastructure and know that they can disrupt learning, like they did in LAUSD with a ransomware attack and tried to shut down a whole school district, the second largest school district in the nation, and interrupt learning. That was a interference that came from outside. That was a malicious intent. And so as we think about those three legs of the stool, interoperability, privacy, and security, we need to make sure we're being attentive to all three.
And the good news is what you're articulating is the opportunity for good partnerships in the private sector and with the government, because in the private sectors, there's huge advancements in this area.
Absolutely.
And you see the opportunity in closing the gap at a much faster rate by encouraging those kinds of collaboration.
Absolutely. I think you have to have supply and demand at the same table. And let's take AI. If you look at data that was just released by the Stanford HAI, Human Artificial Intelligence group, they release an AI index every year. Fascinating work. Big shout out to Vanessa Pirelli over there, who leads that work as the director of research. She unveiled some of this work at National AI Literacy Day, something that EdSafe AI convened with a number of national partners. And it used to be that folks who were getting advanced degrees in AI, some to government, some to research, some, to the private sector. Guess where they're all going right now? They're all going the private sector. So all the knowledge and capacity that we would need to be able to take on the challenge of AI in education, that knowledge, capacity, and expertise lives in the private sector. And so can we be a sector that's a learning system and invites wisdom to the table, from something I said earlier? How do we think about who can come to the table and be part of the solution? And so I think you have to do that if we want to realize the promise of technology for our kids.
Basically, if we're going to make any headway with AI or technology in education, we need to create this innovation and learning apparatus the way that we see in other sectors. And it starts from what you're saying and how we're investing in research and development. And there's precedent for that in agriculture and healthcare. And
energy. Everybody else has it.
Right.
We don't.
Right.
And I just want to say that very clearly. Every other sector has made this fundamental investment in being a learning sector and a learning system. And we have not made that investment in education. And for me, that's completely and totally unacceptable. Because there's nothing more critical than changing the life trajectory pathway of a young person. And I believe that if we don't do this work, it's not just about AI and technology. It's about the wave of bills you're seeing right now about the science of reading in state legislatures. The fact that we knew what worked for 30 years, that is 3 generations of young people, plus maybe 4. And we didn't move the needle and couldn't move to get to do what worked is completely and totally unacceptable. And if people aren't angry about that, I don't think there's anything else they should be angry about right now. I'm a mom of a student who's twice exceptional. He's dyslexic and he's gifted and talented. He struggles to read, but he has to know how to read to develop a passion for reading. And the fact that we were so anchored in developing a passion for reading without knowing how to read, it's just unacceptable. And we could have moved faster, we could have done it sooner, and we could have moved together if we would have invested in the R&D to do it.
And I think part of it is R&D, but also something maybe cultural or the mindsets that people have around research. What do you think, like a district leader, how should district leaders start thinking differently? Do you feel like, where's the breakdown? Why do you think it took so long for that work with the evidence base around the science of reading? And this is actually relevant in the context of the rapid developments with technology. If we don't learn from that, I think we can make that same mistake again. What do you think is necessary to change that paradigm?
So you almost said it there, which is like, how do we develop rapid feedback loops, right? How do we not just prize one type of research, just RCTs? Right. How do we have different types of research that can emerge to guide us? How do we better mobilize that knowledge? So it's not like the knowledge didn't exist. We failed to engage with it, mobilize it, and translate it. And frankly, like, I don't want any superintendent reading research studies. It's the researchers and the research industry's job to make that information digestible and practical. And so there's great work happening at IES around the practice guides. There's great work happening at the Institute for Education Sciences, IES, around the What Works Clearinghouse and revamping it. So it's not just built for researchers, but built for practitioners. But if we don't think about how to make research digestible, knowable, and actionable, then we're going to continue to have this problem. And I think Saga's done a great job at doing this, not to just toot your horn over at Saga, but you guys have done some great work around high dosage tutoring with the University of Chicago. And what I love about those reports is there's no one better than the University of Chicago for research. Well, maybe University of Michigan, but there's very few institutions who can meet that bar. But instead of just publishing a research study, which you guys have, you guys then I publish a set of like what I call like translation documents, things that de-jargonize, that demystify and say like, here's how to get started. Here's the things you can begin to do from a practical perspective. And we need to be doing way more of that translation in our sector, or we're not going to find ourselves able to take advantage of the opportunities that technology or an enhanced investment in R&D would provide.
Yeah, I think from our perspective in this work and the audacious pursuit of scaled impact, we recognize that it wasn't enough just to create these frameworks or these playbooks, because what the challenge that we notice is that even after you create them, a district leader or education leader would take in like, well, how do you adapt this to meet the needs of my local context? Because maybe with tutoring, I have a school site that building where it's smaller, or our schedule is different and they need a lot more guidance and support on like how to apply these effectively. And one of the things we've tried to do is kind of shift from this Saga administered work to like a Saga empowered, where we try to help folks come up a learning curve at a much faster rate so they can apply and use these types of frameworks effectively on their own. And I think for me, what I see necessary in closing that gap, in addition to this guidance, is a lot more technical assistance and support on that. And that's why I'm really excited about the National Partnership for Student Success, is that it's a great network of people on like mental health supports and student success coaching, in addition to high impact tutoring. And so I think seeing more things like that, I think are going to be really important in drawing the line between, evidence to practice. And if we do see this types of legislation pass, like the NEEDS Act, and what kind of opportunities do you think they will open up for district leaders?
One, it will be an unprecedented amount of financial resources to ed R&D. So in order to move movements, you got to grow the pie. You got to make sure that folks aren't fighting over a small pie. In order to have new actors and new folks come in, you have to grow the pie. And so it will grow the pie of resources. It will focus on how do we build a durable state and local infrastructure. It's not enough to invest in federal research. That will never move the needle. You have to build a state and local infrastructure so that research can be happening, evidence building, evidence generation can be happening in practice in every school district in this country. And that means we need to make some investments so that it doesn't just happen in the LAs and New Yorks and the Atlantas, the big ones, but it happens in Kansas City, Colorado, and Birmingham, Alabama, and other places where the diversity of the problem is going to be really important for us to understand what's happening across the space. And then, frankly, I think the NEED Act calls for something that is just fundamentally different. It's about those feedback loops. Too many times in education, we have an intervention or something we want to study, and then we have to wait 5 years to figure out if it actually had an effect. And often it's hard to discern in those types of randomized control trials or RCTs, whether it was the intervention or some other extra polarity that happened, a change in leadership, so on and so forth. So what would it look like to invest in vehicles that actually match the ESSA tiers of evidence, the Every Student Succeeds Act tiers of evidence? There's 4. And the highest tier is around RCTs, but there's 3 other tiers that include different types of research that could include, hypothesized research with just a logic model, a spark, an innovation that we think might change something significantly, or something that we know isn't quite ready for an RCT, but we have enough causal evidence that we can begin to look at quasi-experimental designs. And so changing the type of research we're doing will also change the way we build knowledge and who we think are knowledge brokers. And so if we, again, expand the pie, we build a table that's more diverse, more inclusive, hopefully more community-centric, and doesn't just change what we're doing, but rapidly speed up the development of knowledge mobilization and new innovation in our space.
What is your take on this AI wave that's taking place? Is it another fad that's going to come and go, or are you optimistic about it really being transformative across the education landscape?
I'm a technologist. I think everybody knows that. And so AI has been in our lives for a really, really long time. The first AI chatbot was in the 1960s, and it was about health. So generative AI is not new. Neither is surveillance AI or synthesis AI or the 14 other types of artificial intelligence that are out there. Here's what's different. Here's what I didn't see coming was the consumer breakthrough of generative AI and ChatGPT. The way it broke through, how it captured people's imagination, and the adoption cycle for generative AI is just not something that I ever imagined. And so this is an arrival technology. So it's not blockchain and it's not Web3. It is the internet. And so when an arrival technology happens, and we've had others in our lifetime, think about when the guys at Research in Motion made it that you could get email on your phone. That was an arrival technology. That was about rearranging how data was transferred on wireless towers, the nuts and bolts of that. That was, and we don't call it an arrival technology, but it fundamentally shifted the way you and I interact with technology. And so
I remember that. Being fearful of getting an email on my phone and get charged to my mother and her yelling at me for getting that on my phone. It was high stakes for me.
Very high stakes. I mean, I remember I worked for Arizona State and for Michael Crow, who probably no one's surprise was an early adopter of Blackberries. And I remember getting like him asking us all to have these blue Blackberries that had the wheel and having to carry 2 phones. Later in my life, I had to carry like 6 phones, but it was a big deal. And so So AI is an arrival technology. It is not going to be blockchain or Bitcoin or crypto. It is not a fad. It is here, and it has broken through the consumer consciousness in a way that we will not be able to pull it back. And it's going to speed up. So the thing that is really important for people to understand is simultaneously, this is a little bit of the hot showers and pipes. If generative AI is the hot shower, quantum computing will fundamentally reorder the pipes. And the advancements that have been made in quantum computing, which is the speed at which we process data over the last 2 to 6 years, really sped up the last 2 years. Chip processing, chip speeds, so on and so forth, what we're understanding, Moore's law at play in technology. That's that technology reinvents itself every 18 months. That cycle is speeding up, and it will speed up faster because of quantum. And so I think many of us who have been working in this technology and have been working in technology don't yet know what's coming. But there are ways to balance, I think, both the promise and the peril of AI. And so all the peril parts are AI is technology, and it's built by humans, and humans have bias. And so it's going to be flawed. It is going to amplify our own bias in society. It is going to be a vulnerability for us on data privacy and cybersecurity. All those things are true. And we can build guidelines and guardrails, policy, and do good practice so that that peril is actually more closely linked to promise than it is to danger. And so I'm really hopeful about how AI can help us actually strengthen human connection in education rather than, exacerbate the digital divide or create disconnections. But if we want that to be true, if we want AI to be about promise and about strengthening human connections and frankly removing some of the parts of our education system right now that lead us to lose people, the vast amount of paperwork that you have to do, or having to, take 3 days out of your life to screen all your kids in your classroom for universal screening for dyslexia. There's actually innovation happening right now where we can take that down to 30 minutes and then have a human in a loop to go back and identify those kids that are at risk. And so to do that, though, we need to row together, to walk together. We need to move quickly, but not hurry, to develop a set of guidelines and guardrails to be good stewards of our young people's data and be good stewards of what we imagine is the future of education, and have some space for the things we can't even imagine yet.
So it's here to stay.
Here to stay.
It's real. This is a new moment for us as a species in thinking about AI. In the interim, we don't know quite sure what's to come because of the rapid development of these technologies. But in the interim, you see a great opportunity for leveraging these type of tools that allow humans to become more efficient and effective and really focusing on what matters most, which those connections with kids.
Yeah, and I think it will help us discover more about what learning looks like, because just the ability to process, frankly, like neuroscience data and behavior data at such a fast rate will help us gain more insights into the biological aspects of learning. But AJ, we know what good learning is in this country. We know what the principles of the science of learning and development are. We know about the things that actually work in education. And the reality is there's no piece of technology that will ever replace a great teacher. And that's why in National Partnership for Student Success, you see everything anchored around building and strengthening human connections. Because here's what we know what happens when you do that. Kids who have just one meaningful connection with an adult reduce suicidal ideation by almost a third. We are facing a mental health crisis in this country, so we need to double down on our humanness while also making sure we put the guidelines and guardrails around the technology so that we can believe and have supports for human connection.
I'm a huge admirer of you and everything you've done, and look forward to continuing to work with you in the future.
Thank you.
Follow us for more conversations with leading experts on AI next time on EdHeads.